Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Autism Quality of Life podcast. Today I have with me Scott Kramer, who is a huge innovator in the field of autism, and he has actually founded a really exciting conference for adults on the spectrum. And so today I'm going to be chatting with Scott to share more about the upcoming event with all of you. As always, you can view all of the links and resources from this episode on our website over at www.autismqualityoflife.com. We also have some exciting new resources, books, and information, so please check that out on the website too. All right, let's get into today's episode.
Well, what happened, Terry, was I was going through the streets of downtown Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I would stop by all these nonprofits, and I'd go in there and I'd say, hey, do you have a support group for adults on the spectrum? And all of them would basically say to me, hey, sorry, we don't have anything like that. Good luck to you, yada, yada, yada.
Hey, welcome to a bonus episode of the Autism Quality of Life podcast. So with me, I have Scott Kramer, who is the program director and founder of the GCA Center for Adult Autism, which is based in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area. So GCA started in late 2010, and it runs and facilitates support groups and social events in Tennessee and Georgia, as well as a monthly social group that meets in the metro Atlanta, Georgia area. So Scott is an adult on the autism spectrum and is married to his wonderful spouse and life partner, April, and believes that people, regardless of disability, can be successful. So, hey, Scott.
Hey, Terry. Hey, I'm doing wonderful, and thank you for having me as a guest on your podcast. As you had mentioned, I'm down here in Atlanta. I'm getting ready to do a presentation called Health and Wellness. Basically what it does, it goes into a research study that some Swedish researchers did, and it was a longitudinal, about 22-year study. And they wanted to know from their research why it is that adults on the spectrum were dying an average of 17 years early when compared with the non-spectrum population. And what they discovered and I don't like using labels here because they do not really tell the value of a person or the quality of what a person does, but with the high-functioning autism population, that the leading cause is suicide. And so based upon that information, I think one of the things that they concluded from that study alone was that there's a strong need of support systems that adults on the spectrum truly do need to have.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, thanks for sharing some of that. Yeah, so it sounds like you're really passionate about health issues for adults on the spectrum, as well as improving their quality of life, generally speaking. So can you tell us a bit about your work with GCA? What is it exactly, and how was it founded?
Yes, thank you, Terry. Basically, GCA, in late 2010, I had just received written documentation of my autism diagnosis. 3 years earlier, I had been diagnosed by a physician, but I had never received any written documentation. To me, that's important. Now, there are people out there listening right now, and they may feel like, well, they don't need a written documentation if they feel like they've been told by a medical or mental health professional, they're on the autism spectrum. It takes a lot of stress off their shoulders, and it's just a gigantic sense of relief. But for individuals like myself, having that written documentation, it just means so much more. For about 3 years, I went trying to get written documentation. I finally got that. Well, what happened, Terry, was I was going through the streets of downtown Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I would stop by all these nonprofits, and I'd go in there and I'd say, hey, do you have a support group for adults on the spectrum? And all of them would basically say to me, hey, sorry, we don't have anything like that. Good luck to you. So, the same type of responses kept coming back, and I got to the point where it's like, I'm getting sick of this and tired of this. And, one of the things I discovered is, well, if people are saying that sort of thing, obviously it must mean something. So I did the next best thing, which was to found GCA. Now, in a nutshell, for the first 4.5 years, it was an adult-only support group because I wasn't interested in meeting with young adults or their parents or caregivers or anything like that, but just the older adults. So it was that way for about the first 4.5 years. But around the summer of 2015, I started getting all these calls from parents, and usually it was one of two questions, and sometimes it was both. the first question is, what will happen if my child dies? And I hear that even today. And the second question is, how do I get my child off the computer? Because one of the things about, individuals in the autism spectrum, and this isn't true in all cases, but what you find with a lot of individuals in the autism spectrum is they're just really good with computers. And so there's a certain fascination with computers, the technology, the computer programming, and all that sort of thing. But anyway, I got the sort of questions. So in the fall of 2015, we had this, I went to the inaugural North Georgia Autism Conference. And so there was a breakout session of the parents, the adults, and a lot of the parents were there. And so they said, well, hey, Scott, we know that you have these support groups in Tennessee. I'd like to know if you can replicate something like that in Georgia. I said, certainly, why not? So we started a second set of support groups there in North Georgia. And then from there, in 2016, we added the GCA newsletter. We developed the GCA website. And it's just one thing just built upon another, just built upon there. It's just one of those kind of things, like everything just mushrooms, all of a sudden.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And then from there, that's where a lot of other groups, such as the Virginia Tech Center of Autism Research over in Blacksburg, Virginia, that's where the Autism Society of Georgia, groups like that started coming up to me and said, Scott, they're basically trying to vet me, trying to gauge my interest, see what I want to do. But at the same time, I was willing to go out there and, kind of get the word out there about my life and just being people and networking and that sort of thing. So I just, I did all that, and I still do it to this day. So basically, after all these things took place, I realized, hey, I've got all this stuff going right now, and it's like I ended up talking with an executive director of a foundation, a local foundation. He was like, Scott, GCA, I wouldn't know who GCA is. Who's GCA? You are a center of resources, autism resources. So through a lot of collaboration with that individual, it's like we rebranded ourselves as the GCA Center for Adult Autism, Greater Chattanooga and North Georgia. But really, in a nutshell, it's more like the Southeast, because I'm pretty active in a number of the southern states here, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and other states in this geographical area where I do a lot of collaborations. And I just find that everywhere I go, at least in this part of the United States, there's a lack of adult autism resources. And so one of my goals is, as I'm, collaborating with organizations and everything else, it's about how can we develop these resources so that way, some of the parents that are listening right now are like, they want to know what is out there for my child. And then they have a transition team, that child's going to graduate from high school in a couple of years. And so, it's going to be individuals like them. It's individuals I've already spoken with, those parents as well. They're concerned. They don't know what's out there. They want to know that something is out there. And so those are the kind of things I'm looking at.
That's so exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it really sounds like you're holding up the fort in the southeast part of the country there.
Well,
and that the work you're doing can really be an inspiration for adult autism centers across the country that are likely to be springing up in upcoming years as the population ages.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I think as I'm looking at the future trends of what's going to be taking place, I think you pretty much touched on something about, autism centers that are geared toward adults, or at least building upon those, so that way there's an adult element. Thing is, all the parents that are listening to you right now, and all the other parents, just all your listeners in general, pretty much know that autism ages out. So, autism doesn't stop after a child is 18 years old. They will live on the autism spectrum the rest of their lives. So the question comes from, okay, so if you're a parent of a child on the spectrum under 18, fine, you have the IEP, you have all these other support mechanisms in place where the schools are required to provide these services. Then, after they transition out, then what happens? And I think that, we're going to be looking at several trends down the road. Of course, one which we've already talked about. Another trend that I think that we'll be seeing down the road in the future are reverse job fairs. And for anybody listening to this who's not familiar with that, basically what a reverse job fair is a traditional job fair of which the employers and the job applicants switch positions. In other words, the job applicants are behind the tables and all the employers are in the middle of the floor. The reason why that's important is because there's a lot of sensitivity when it comes to job fairs. A lot of employees or a lot of job applicants, face a lot of different types of sensitivities. So let's say, for example, Indianapolis, you have Eli Lilly as a major employer there, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that you represent Eli Lilly as an employer. In a traditional job fair, you're going to have a whole bunch of people that are interested in working for Eli Lilly because it's a good place to work, has good benefits, and all these other things. Let's take somebody like myself, or it doesn't matter, but let's just take somebody who's on the autism spectrum. They may have they may be a Purdue graduate or an Indiana graduate or an IUPUI graduate or whatever. Anyway, they want to work for Eli Lilly. So the conversation may go like this. They're going up to the booth, and so that person introduces themselves to you. Hey, my name is Scott Kramer. I'm in my last semester at IUPUI. I'm an accounting major, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going on a little bit trying to introduce myself, and then you're introducing yourself back to me. And then you may pose a question, be like, well, what interests you about the Eli Lilly? And then all of a sudden, my mind will go blank. Why? Because before I know it, I've got all these other people around me that are right there next to me at the Eli Lilly booth, exhibitor booth, I don't want to talk with you. You want to talk with all these other people. So you have all these different sensitivities that, come into action here. For example, you have sound sensitivities from all the noises that go around at a job fair. You have the light sensitivities because of all the lights that are up there in the ceiling and everything else. Then if somebody actually brushes against you, there's tactile sensitivities, and it just goes on and on. That's why people will find that individuals who are going to traditional job fairs who have disabilities, it could be autism, it could be whatever. But anyway, they go to a traditional job fair and there's a challenge. Now, what a reverse job fair does, it takes those sensitivities, it doesn't take them away, but it minimizes those sensitivities. So it becomes more of a one-on-one type of, you're communicating on a one-on-one basis. So it's a lot easier for the employer. It's a lot easier for a job applicant who has disabilities. In the end, communication tends to go a lot better. And with a number of these reverse job fairs, there will be display boards. And the advantages of using a display board as opposed to a resume, you can only see so much information if you're Eli Lilly. But if you're Eli Lilly and you're coming to my table and you see the display board, it's going to give you a lot more information about me. So again, it reduces stress.
Oh, okay. So the individual on the spectrum is sitting at the table and they have a display board out in front of them that describes a little background on who they are and their skills and abilities?
Well, I don't know if it necessarily would describe about who they are per se, but it will tell more about the work.
Okay.
One of the things that Tibble Grandin suggests is the idea that people on the spectrum should keep a portfolio. Basically, why that is, it's kind of like with a portfolio, you have all this information. So if you're an artist or you're an English major or something like that, you have all this stuff you've done. And likewise with this display board, if you're an engineering major or you're in a situation where you've had a lot of experience being with clubs, you can go ahead and put all that information on there. Because the thing that the employer wants to see is, who are you as a person? How can you contribute to my organization? In this case, Eli Lilly. How can you contribute to Eli Lilly? Why should I consider you? But also at the same time, the advantage of these disability type of reverse job fairs is that the employer is, in the end, they end up having to cross that bridge. And what I mean by crossing that bridge is having that conversation about disability. One of the things that I think big business is really slow to understand is the fact that a lot of these individuals, regardless if they're in college or they've graduated from college, or they haven't even been in college, they just have a high school diploma or something like that. They do have a unique skill set. They have abilities. They have that knowledge. I mean, I can tell you of several individuals here, at least in the Chattanooga area, that I collaborate with, that I work with, and that would make really wonderful employees. But the problem is, businesses are starting to pick on that a little bit more and more as time goes on. And the example that I'll give you, or a couple of examples that I'll give you, about a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, SAP, which is a technology giant in Germany, started a pilot program to hire individuals in the autism spectrum. And what they found out is that it really worked, because the advantages that adults on the spectrum can bring to it, you're looking at things like loyalty. They're very loyal. They show up every day. No challenges there. Also, you're looking at repetition type of activities, doing the same things over and over and over. Not a problem there. And so they make very valuable employees, and that's something that big business has been slow to pick up on. Here in the United States, you look at Microsoft here about 2 years ago, they started their pilot program. The Ford Motor Company, basically an automotive manufacturer here in this country, they started their pilot program. So big business is starting to pick up on these things, but it's been a little bit slower than a lot of us would like.
Yeah, there definitely is a lot of new ventures in the area of employment and disability consulting, though. So you're right, the field is growing. So I want to make a transition here. So one of the main reasons that we were chatting this evening is to talk about your upcoming conference, the inaugural Tri-State Adult Autism Symposium Conference, which will be this July. And so I'm really excited to share more about this with our audience.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. As you had mentioned, it is the inaugural Tri-State Adult Autism Symposium Conference. In a nutshell, it's the first adult autism conference east of the Mississippi River. In other words, you go to a lot of these, people can go to a lot of autism or disability-related conferences. You might have a few sessions for adults that are on the spectrum, or a track for adults on the spectrum or something like that. But there hasn't been anything geared specifically like just a day-long conference that is geared toward adult autism themes. And that is one of the things that makes this conference stand out. Talking about themes, you're looking at things like employment, independent living, social relationships, health and wellness. Ironically, these are for the areas that a lot of parents, are concerned about their kids. Employment, where is my child going to work? Independent living, how will they be able to live on their own from day to day? Social relationships, this is a big one. Because what happens is a lot of these children, and I'm sure a lot of the parents listening to this can relate here. But what will happen is that a lot of the kids will come home from school, and a lot of them will want to tell their parents, I just want to stay in my room, blah, blah, blah. And so the conversation might ensue. It's like, why do you want to stay in your room? Oh, I don't have any friends. I don't know how to make friends. Well, Terry, the thing is, all of us have social needs. It doesn't matter if we're a child in the autism spectrum or not. We all have social needs. And those social needs are not met in childhood. They transition over to adulthood. And likewise, children on the autism spectrum transition over to adulthood as well. So basically what happens is that when these individuals become adults, if those social needs haven't been met, instead of going to their parents, now they're going to their caseworker, they're going to their social worker, whoever, and they still have the same questions. I feel lonely. I want to make friends. I don't know how to make friends. Those sorts of things. So that is one of the things that really sets this conference apart from all the others. And part of what we try to do is create social networking opportunities. When I found out, after talking with about 25 different executive directors in Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia, and I had one question for them. I said, of all these autism and disability-related conferences you've been to, what is the one thing that's missing from all those conferences that would set this particular conference apart? And they said, social networking opportunities. So being an adult on the autism spectrum myself, I just grabbed onto that very quickly. I'm like, hey, yeah, I can relate to this. I know what it was like when I was younger and I really didn't have any friends and that sort of thing, but I know others that were worse off than myself. So we have 3 social networking events that are part of this conference. 2 take place the day before the conference on Friday, July 21st, and the other one takes place on Saturday, July 22nd. Basically, on the day before, we have a welcome reception. And so we have 3 entertainers coming into from South Carolina and 1 from Florida. And so they'll be performing. It's a talent show or something like that. And then that evening, after the first event is over with, then we have a dining out event where we'll have a list of restaurants that will be given these individuals that they'll also be able to find on the website when we get that information up, that they can go anywhere in the Chattanooga area. It's an opportunity for them to make new friends that are adults in the spectrum or whatever, or to continue building on the new friendships they met at the welcome reception. Then the third event takes place the Saturday evening or the evening after the conference is over with. And it's more or less it's kind of like a closing reception, but it's a way for these adults to be able to take the skills that they've learned from this conference and apply it in that particular setting. And the reason why that's important is because one of the last sessions during this conference is on keeping friends and developing romantic relationships. And so that's the reason why, with that session and all the other sessions that we have during the conference, we want these individuals to be able to build those friendships, to build those bonds of friendship. One reason why that's important, it already goes back to what we talked about earlier about their social needs. The short-term objective or goal that we have for this particular conference is for those individuals to trade their email addresses, Facebook information, phone numbers, and that kind of stuff. We want them to stay in touch until the following year's conference. And then long-term, our goal is about 4 or 5 years down the road after this conference, we want a couple of those individuals to come back to me or somebody else and say, you know what, Scott, I did exactly what you told me to do. I exchanged all this information with some of these really cool people that I met at your conference. And so we stayed in touch for about 4 to 5 years. And so we want to thank you for this.
Oh.
That is how I know that this conference will work.
Yeah, I love that idea. That's a wonderful objective.
Thank you.
So would you mind maybe giving us a sneak preview of some of the guests who will be attending the conference and maybe sharing some background about their work and what they might be speaking about that day?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I could speak several hours on this. Go ahead. I will touch on a few individuals.
Great.
Megan Lindsay, who is the director of the Stages program over at the Chattanooga Autism Center. Basically, what Stages is, it's one of the adult arms of the Chattanooga Autism Center, along with the GCA Center. Whereas where we focus on support groups and social events, they're focused on social skills, pre-employment type of activities to help people get ready to interview for jobs and that sort of thing. Basically, what Megan has done in the past is she's actually done a training on how to effectively reach these adults who are interested in employment opportunities. The reason why that's important is because the unemployment rate for adults in the spectrum, young adults, that demographic is anywhere, the unemployment, underemployment rate combined is between 90 to 93%, depending which numbers you go with. So this particular session will be focused on service providers, just anybody in particular that is involved with employment in terms of reaching out to that population. Then Beth Bergman, who's up from the Twin Cities, Minneapolis area, she teaches a class called Cook Once, Eat All Week. It's on her health and wellness track. And so what she does is she does an interactive training where, she teaches people in a kitchen type setting about food prep, and then what she pretty much does is that she teaches people to cook for about a 2 to 3 hour period, like on a weekend or something like that, to cook all the food that you need for the entire week. So that way you just package the food, you put it in the freezer, you do what you want with it, but you have food for an entire week. And that's important because a lot of these individuals that are on the spectrum have lived with their parents A lot of them have lived with their parents for basically most or all of their entire lives. And so one of the means to being successful in the area of independent living is knowing how to fix food, even if it's very basic. So we have that. We have a panel of successful adults that are on the autism spectrum. We're developing that. One of the things I keep hearing from parents from various conferences that they want to see a panel of successful adults that are on the spectrum because they want to see, the reason why that is they think, well, if I can see these adults being successful, then my son or daughter can be successful. That's so true. That is so true. And then we have a couple of research sessions and that sort of thing because we will have researchers at this particular conference. It's just basically looking the people that would be interested in this conference are going to be the adults and young adults in the spectrum, obviously the parents, caregivers, service providers and other professionals, researchers, and basically anybody else who would be interested in this type of information. I would think there would be a lot of people that would have that interest. Also, after our lunch keynote speaker is done, we will have about 30 or 35 minutes aside, so that way attendees that are at the conference don't feel rushed to go into our session. They can take that time just to take it easy, take a break, visit exhibitors and that sort of thing. In terms of cost and that sort of thing, when we put this conference together, it would have been very easy to price this $80, $90, $100. But it's nowhere close to that. What if I told everybody listening to this that the registration cost is only $35?
Very nice.
And if you're student, early bird, $22. You can't beat that. And the reason for that is we have generous sponsors who decide, you know what, even though this is the first year you're doing this adult autism conference, we believe in what you're wanting to do in terms of trying to reach out to this. We want to invest in what you're doing. That's the reason why we're able to price this as low as we can. Also, we will have registration waivers available for individuals who have economic hardships. They will mainly be for residents of Tennessee and Georgia, though we will have some available to individuals that live outside those two states. So I just want your listenership to know that if you're interested in this conference or you know somebody else that might be interested in this conference, don't let an economic hardship keep you from attending or keep them from attending.
That's great. Yeah, and are there opportunities to be a volunteer at the conference as well? You might have mentioned that in a different conversation.
Yes, thank you. There will be a number of volunteer opportunities. In order to put on a conference like this, we need many volunteers. And there will be all sorts of different opportunities that people can choose from. It could be for a couple hours. It could be from, most of the day. It depends on what your needs are and how you want to do that. The great thing about volunteering is that, if somebody chooses to do that, their registration fee is taken care of, and of course, lunch is provided. So if you know of somebody that wants to be a volunteer, or if you know of somebody that is looking to, has an interest in a registration type waiver, they can always contact me at the following address. And it's my first name, Scott, SCOTT, Kramer, KRAMER, and that's at Chattanooga, CHATTANOOGA, Autism Center.org. Again, that's Scott.Kramer at Chattanooga Autism Center, that's one word, .org.
Great. Okay, thanks for spelling that out for us. And I'll include that information in our show notes as well. And then we can definitely link to your website and all of the resources for the conference.
Great. And just one thing, if anybody's interested in learning more about the GCA Center for Adult Autism, all you have to do is go to GCA Center, and that's CENTRE.org.
Okay, great. So that's more about the center. And then are there other ways that folks can follow you guys on social media or on any other online platforms?
Oh, absolutely. The GCA Center has its own Facebook group. Also, it's on LinkedIn. It's on Twitter, and I'll give you that information quickly here. If if anybody's interested in going on the Facebook, if you search GCA Center for Adult Autism, and again, center is CENTRE, not ER. There's that. Also, if you search that on LinkedIn, if you search that on Twitter, you should be able to get that information. If not, if you're interested in becoming part of any of those and you can't find that, just email me.
Sounds good. So there are a number of ways to get in touch with you, Scott, and to learn more about GCA Autism Center. So for folks who might be interested in potentially attending the conference in July or learning more about it, where would you recommend that they go to first?
Okay, I would recommend anybody who is interested in learning more about the conference and registering as an attendee, go to the GCA Center website again, which is www.gcaspies.org. That'll take you to the website. If you go type /conference, it'll take you to the homepage of the conference. If you want information about exhibitors, that would be the website /exhibitors. If you want attendee information, that would be the website and then /attendees. Plenty of information up there, and we're always updating information all the time whenever we can.
Okay, wonderful. So Scott, it's almost time to start wrapping up our chat this evening. Do you have any final piece of guidance for the community or something else that you'd like to share about the upcoming conference that we haven't touched upon yet?
Well, the conference, there's always new information that's being added, but the one thing I like to share with your listenership right now, if you're a parent out there, you're a caregiver, even if you're an adult on the spectrum, if you're listening to this right now, there's something I want to share with you, and that is part of the reason why the GCA Center exists are because of a couple of things. One is hope and one is opportunity. Basically, that shows in our logo, which has nothing to do with the puzzle piece whatsoever. But when you think about hope and you think about opportunity, you think about a chance. You think about a fighting chance. And so when I look at, a lot of these adults on the spectrum, when I look at a lot of the kids who are on the spectrum, what I see is hope. What I see is opportunity. What I see is potential. And the thing about it is, no matter what society said about you as an adult on the spectrum, or you as a parent of a child or adult on the spectrum, or an autistic adult or autistic child, we are no less different than anybody else. We have our challenges. We're different in terms of how we go across, how we come across things and everything else. Maybe it's our speech, maybe it's whatever. But we are special in our own ways. We have our own gifts. We have our own ways that we contribute. And just because somebody has a disability doesn't mean that they cannot contribute. They can contribute. It just may not be as much as what society thinks we can contribute or anything else, but we can make a difference. And it doesn't have to be with starting a support group. All you have to do is find out where your niche is in this world, how it is that you can make a difference in somebody else's life. Because when we all die one day, people are not going to care about, so he was living on the autism spectrum and everything else. People are not going to remember that. What they're going to remember is how much of a difference you made in somebody else's life.
That is such a great message, Scott. Oh, thank you for all of the work that you're putting into your efforts with GCA and planning this incredible conference, which is sure to be such a wonderful experience for families, professionals, researchers, everyone who's coming together in the Southeast to have the inaugural Tri-State Adult Autism Symposium Conference.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to share this with a broader community across the country, and perhaps we'll see more adult autism conferences spring up.
Great.
And folks can learn from your work and what you're doing.
All right, and thank you for having me on your podcast, Jerry.
Thank you so much for your time and for coming on the podcast. Hey, Quality of Lifers. Thanks so much for listening to today's bonus episode with Scott Kramer. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the Adult Autism Symposium that's going to be in Tennessee this coming July. Please share this information with family and friends and your clients and anyone else who you think might benefit from knowing about this event. To learn more about today's episode and to view our show notes with more information about the conference, please visit us on our website at www.autismqualityoflife.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll catch you next time.